The rain hammered against the floor-to-ceiling windows of the penthouse as Marcus Holloway stepped through the doorway. Exhaustion etched into every line of his face. The merger had taken 3 grueling weeks in Tokyo. Endless negotiations that had finally concluded at dawn. He'd caught the first flight back to New York, wanting nothing more than the silence of his own space and perhaps a glass of the scotch he kept in his study. But silence wasn't what greeted him. The faint scent of lemon cleaner wafted through the air, and he could hear movement coming from deeper within the apartment. Marcus froze, his hand instinctively reaching for his phone. His housekeeper, Mrs. Patterson, only came on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and today was Saturday. The security system hadn't been triggered, which meant whoever was inside had the access code. He moved quietly through the foyer, past the marble console table where he normally dropped his keys, and rounded the corner into the living room. What he saw stopped him completely. Kneeling on the pristine hardwood floor, surrounded by cleaning supplies and wearing faded jeans and an oversized sweater, was Melissa Brennan, his executive assistant. The woman who had worked beside him for the past 4 years, managing his impossible schedule with efficiency that bordered on miraculous, was scrubbing his baseboards with an intensity that seemed almost desperate. "Melissa," she jolted upright, nearly knocking over a bucket of soapy water. Her face flushed crimson as she scrambled to her feet, pushing a strand of honey blonde hair behind her ear. "Mr. Holloway, I didn't expect you back until tomorrow evening." Marcus sat down his briefcase, his mind racing through possible explanations. "That was the plan, but we wrapped up early." He gestured around the spotless room. "What's going on? Why are you cleaning my apartment?" Melissa's gray eyes darted away from his, and she began gathering the cleaning supplies with shaking hands. "I'm so sorry. This is completely inappropriate. I should have asked permission. I'll leave right now." "Wait." Marcus held up a hand, his voice gentler than usual. In 4 years, he'd never seen Melissa like this, flustered, vulnerable, and clearly trying not to cry. At the office, she was unflappable, handling crisis after crisis with a calm competence that had made her indispensable. "Please, just tell me what's happening." She stood there, clutching a spray bottle like a lifeline. And for a long moment, Marcus thought she might bolt. But then her shoulders sagged, and she sank down onto the edge of his designer couch, looking smaller than he'd ever seen her. "I needed the extra money," she said quietly, not meeting his eyes. "I saw online that some executives hire their assistants for additional household tasks, and I thought, I know you value your privacy, so I figured if I just came when you were away, maybe you'd appreciate coming home to a clean space. And maybe you consider paying me extra for it." Marcus felt something twist in his chest. He paid Melissa a generous salary, $120,000 a year, plus bonuses. For a 28-year-old, she should have been comfortable. "Melissa, if you needed more money, why didn't you just ask for a raise? Your performance reviews have been exceptional." Her laugh was hollow. "Because I'm not asking for a raise for work I'm actually qualified to do. I'm begging for housekeeping money because I'm desperate." The word hung in the air between them, heavy and awful. Marcus had built his empire on reading people, on understanding what motivated them, what they feared, what they needed. But he realized with sudden, uncomfortable clarity that he'd never really looked at Melissa beyond her role in his life. She was his assistant, brilliant, efficient, always there when he needed her. He'd never asked about her life outside those parameters. "Tell me," he said, sitting down in the armchair across from her. "Please." Melissa was quiet for so long that Marcus wondered if she'd refuse. But then she started talking, her voice barely above a whisper. "My mom has early onset Alzheimer's. She's only 56. The words came out flat, rehearsed, as if she'd had to explain this too many times. "She was diagnosed 2 years ago, right before I started working for you. It's progressing faster than anyone expected. She can't live alone anymore. Can't remember to take her medications. Can't remember who I am most days." Marcus felt his throat tighten. The memory care facility where she's staying costs $8,000 a month. Melissa continued, staring down at her hands. "Insurance covers some of it, but not enough. I have student loans. Rent in this city is insane. And I'm trying to save for when she needs even more intensive care. I picked up freelance work editing resumes at night. I cut every expense I could, but it's still not enough. So I thought. She gestured helplessly around the room. I thought maybe I could clean houses on weekends, starting with yours since I already have access and you're traveling so much. The rain continued its assault on the windows, filling the silence that stretched between them. Marcus remembered the late nights when Melissa had stayed at the office, the time she'd rescheduled his meetings without explanation, the dark circles under her eyes that he'd attributed to their demanding work schedule. He thought of all the moments she'd smiled and said everything was fine, handling his needs while her own world was crumbling. "How long have you been doing this?" he asked. "This is the first time," she admitted. "I cleaned for 5 hours this morning. I was almost done when you came in." Marcus stood abruptly, walking to the windows and staring out at the rain-soaked city below. 43 floors down, people were rushing through their Saturday, dealing with their own struggles, their own desperations. He'd built Holloway Enterprises from nothing, turned a single software patent into a billion-dollar empire, and prided himself on being a fair employer. But somehow he'd missed that the person closest to his daily life was drowning. "Go home, Melissa," he said finally, his back still to her. He heard her quick intake of breath, the rustle of fabric as she stood. "I understand. I'll submit my resignation on Monday. I'm so sorry for the breach of no." He turned to face her, and something in his expression made her words die. "Go home, pack a bag, and take the rest of the weekend to rest. On Monday, we're going to have a very different conversation than you're imagining." Confusion flickered across her face. "I don't understand." Marcus picked up his phone, already composing a text to his attorney. "You will, but right now you look exhausted, and I suspect you haven't taken a real day off in months. Go home. That's not a request. It's an order from your boss." Melissa gathered her cleaning supplies, moving like someone in a dream. As she reached the door, she paused and looked back at him. "Mr. Holloway, I really am sorry. I should never have. Monday, Melissa will talk Monday." After she left, Marcus stood alone in his immaculately clean penthouse, his mind already working through calculations and possibilities. He pulled out his phone and made a call, not caring that it was Saturday evening. "Richard, it's Marcus Holloway. I need you to draft some documents for me." "No, it can't wait until Monday." As he spoke, outlining his instructions to his bewildered attorney, Marcus found himself thinking about the woman who had just left, the one he'd worked beside for 4 years without really seeing. That was about to change. Everything was about to change. But first, he had plans to make. Monday morning arrived with the kind of crystalline autumn sunshine that made New York City look like it belonged on a postcard. Melissa stood in front of Holloway Enterprises' gleaming headquarters, her stomach churning with anxiety. She'd barely slept all weekend, alternating between rehearsing resignation speeches and imagining worst-case scenarios. The building's revolving doors spun her into the marble lobby, where she nodded mechanically at the security guards who knew her by name. 52 floors up, the executive suite hummed with its usual Monday morning energy. Junior associates rushed past with coffee cups and tablets, their faces tight with the peculiar stress that came from working at one of Manhattan's most demanding firms. "Morning, Mel," called Jennifer from accounting. But Melissa could barely manage a smile in return. She'd spent the entire weekend replaying Saturday in her mind. The humiliation of being caught on her knees, scrubbing someone else's floors. The mortification of having to explain about her mother, about the money, about the desperation that had driven her to such a degrading solution. And worst of all, the look on Marcus Holloway's face, something between pity and disappointment that made her want to sink through the floor. Her resignation letter was printed and folded in her bag. She'd rewritten it 7 times, each version more professional than the last, until the words meant nothing at all. The frosted glass door to Marcus' office was closed when she arrived at her desk, the sleek workstation that guarded the entrance to his inner sanctum. Melissa set down her bag and powered up her computer with trembling fingers. Maybe she could leave the letter on her desk and slip out before he arrived. Maybe she could avoid the whole painful conversation altogether. "You're here early." She jumped, spinning around to find Marcus standing behind her, 2 coffee cups in his hands. He wore a charcoal suit that probably cost more than her monthly rent. his dark hair still slightly damp from a morning shower. At 42, he carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone who'd built an empire and knew exactly what he was worth. "I'm always here early, Mr. Holloway," she managed, hating how her voice shook. "Yes, you are." He handed her one of the coffee cups. "Vanilla latte, extra shot, no sugar." "That's still right, isn't it?" Melissa stared at the cup. In 4 years, Marcus had never brought her coffee. She brought him coffee. That was how their relationship worked. She anticipated his needs, managed his schedule, made his life run smoothly. This reversal felt wrong, disorienting. "Thank you," she whispered. "Come into my office, please." It wasn't a request. Her legs felt like water as she followed him through the frosted glass door. The office was exactly as she remembered. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park, minimalist furniture that cost more than most people's cars, and a massive desk that served as command center for a business empire worth $3.2 billion. Marcus gestured to the leather chairs arranged around a coffee table near the windows, the informal seating area where he conducted his more personal meetings. Melissa perched on the edge of one, clutching her latte like a shield. He sat across from her and, for a moment, just looked at her with an intensity that made her want to disappear. "How's your mother?" he asked finally. The question caught her off guard. She had a good weekend, actually. On Sunday, she remembered my name for almost an hour. We looked through old photo albums together. That must have been nice. It was. Melissa's throat tightened. "It doesn't happen often anymore." Marcus nodded slowly, then leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. "I'm going to say something, and I need you to just listen until I'm finished. Can you do that?" Dread pulled in her stomach. "Yes, sir. I spent the weekend doing research." He began. Memory care facilities in Manhattan range from $5 to $15,000 monthly, depending on the level of care required. The average progression of early-onset Alzheimer's means your mother will likely need increasingly intensive care over the next 5 to 7 years. Your student loans total approximately $80,000. I'm guessing from Columbia, given your resume, and you're paying $2,200 a month for a studio apartment in Queens because it's the cheapest you could find that's still reasonably safe and close to your mother's facility. Melissa felt the blood drain from her face. "How did you?" "I made some calls. Asked some questions." He held up a hand before she could protest. "Before you get angry about the invasion of privacy, understand that I needed the full picture to make an informed decision." "Decision about what?" Marcus stood and walked to his desk, retrieving a folder that he'd apparently prepared in advance. He handed it to her, then returned to his seat, watching her face carefully. With shaking hands, Melissa opened the folder. Inside were several documents, dense with legal language that she couldn't quite process through the roaring in her ears. But certain phrases jumped out at her. Salary adjustment to $200,000 annually. Comprehensive benefits package including dependent care, educational assistance for medical expenses. "I don't understand," she breathed. "You're getting a significant raise," Marcus said simply. "One that should have happened 2 years ago if I'd been paying attention." Additionally, Holloway Enterprises is implementing a new dependent care assistance program. You'll be the first beneficiary, but not the last. It will cover up to $10,000 monthly for qualifying medical care for immediate family members. Melissa's hands began to shake so badly that the papers rustled. "Mr. Holloway, I can't accept this. This is charity. This is your employer recognizing that he's been blind and selfish." Marcus interrupted, his voice firm. "Do you know how many times in the past 4 years you've stayed late to fix my mistakes? How many weekends you've sacrificed because I needed something handled immediately? How many times you made me look brilliant when I was actually scrambling? That's my job. No, your job description is executive assistant. And what you've actually been is my right hand, my problem solver, and the person who keeps this entire operation running smoothly when I'm too focused on the next deal to notice what's falling apart. You're worth every penny of this raise based purely on your professional performance." Tears burned behind Melissa's eyes. "But the dependent care program is something this company should have had years ago," Marcus said quietly. "I built Holloway Enterprises on the principle that innovation comes from taking care of people, But somewhere along the way, I forgot that applies to my own employees too. You forced me to see that. So, yes, you're the catalyst for this program, but it's not charity. It's the right thing to do. A tear escaped down Melissa's cheek, and she swiped at it angrily. I don't know what to say. Say you'll accept it. Say you'll stop trying to work 3 jobs and actually take care of yourself. Say you'll let me help carry some of this weight you've been shouldering alone. Melissa looked up at him, really looked at him, and saw something in his expression she'd never noticed before. Concern. Yes, but also something else. Something that made her heart skip unexpectedly. In 4 years of working together, she maintained strict professional boundaries, never letting herself acknowledge that Marcus Holloway was an attractive man, never letting herself wonder what it might be like if circumstances were different. There's one more thing, Marcus said, pulling out another document. This is a contract with Evergreen Memory Care, the best facility in the state. They have an opening for your mother, and the room overlooks a garden that's maintained year-round. They specialize in early onset cases and have a staff-to-patient ratio that's twice the industry standard. Now the tears came in earnest, streaming down Melissa's face as she pressed her hand to her mouth. That facility has a 2-year waiting list. I call them when Mom was first diagnosed. Not anymore. Marcus' voice was gentle. I may have made some persuasive arguments about corporate sponsorship and charitable donations. Your mother can move in next week if you'd like. Melissa couldn't breathe. The enormity of what he was offering, what he'd done, crashed over her like a wave. For years of drowning, of barely keeping her head above water, of sacrificing everything to make sure her mother had decent care. And suddenly, impossibly, someone had thrown her a lifeline. Why? She whispered. Why are you doing this? Marcus was quiet for a long moment, and something shifted in his expression. Something vulnerable that she'd never seen before. Because on Saturday, I came home to find the most competent person I know, reduced to scrubbing my floors out of desperation. Because I realized that I've been so focused on building an empire that I forgot to see the people building it with me. And because he paused, seeming to struggle with the words. Because you matter, Melissa. Not just as an employee, as a person. And I should have made sure you knew that a long time ago. The air between them felt charged, electric with something unspoken. Melissa's heart hammered against her ribs as she met his gaze, seeing past the billionaire boss to the man underneath. The one who'd spent his weekend researching Alzheimer's care and restructuring his company's benefits to help her. I don't know how to thank you, she said, her voice breaking. Then don't. Just promise me something. Marcus leaned forward, his dark eyes intense. Promise me that if you're ever struggling again, if you ever need help with anything, you'll come to me. No more trying to handle everything alone. I promise. Good. He smiled then, a real smile that transformed his usually serious face. Now, I believe we have a board meeting in an hour, and I need you to brief me on the Patterson acquisition. Think you can pull yourself together enough for that? Melissa laughed through her tears, a sound of pure relief and unexpected joy. Yes, Mr. Holloway, I think I can manage that. As she stood to leave, clutching the folder that represented a complete transformation of her life, Marcus called her name. She turned back to find him watching her with an expression she couldn't quite decipher. One more thing, Melissa. The raise and the benefits package are effective immediately, but they come with a condition. Her heart sank. Of course, there was a catch. There was always a catch. What condition? Stop calling me Mr. Holloway when we're alone. My name is Marcus. His smile turned slightly mischievous. I think after 4 years and a rather dramatic weekend, we can drop some of the formality, don't you? Warmth flooded through her chest. Yes, Marcus, I think we can. 3 months passed in a blur of transformation that Melissa could barely believe was real. Every morning, she woke up in her apartment, the same small studio, because she refused to move somewhere extravagant just because she could now afford it and had to remind herself that this wasn't a dream. Her mother had settled beautifully into Evergreen Memory Care. The facility was everything Marcus had promised and more. Rose Brennan had a corner room with windows overlooking gardens that bloomed even in November, maintained by a staff that treated each resident like family. The nurses knew her favorite songs, her preference for tea over coffee, and on good days, they'd help her tend to a small herb garden on the terrace. Melissa visited every evening after work, and twice now her mother had looked at her with clear recognition and said, "There's my girl." Those moments were worth everything. At the office, things had shifted in ways both subtle and profound. Marcus, she still sometimes slipped and called him Mr. Holloway. But he gently corrected her each time, had become more than just her boss. They developed an easy rapport that went beyond their professional relationship. He asked about her mother regularly, remembered details from their conversations, and sometimes when they worked late, he'd order dinner for both of them, and they'd eat in his office, talking about everything from business strategy to childhood memories to their favorite books. It was during one of those late evenings in early December that everything changed. The office was quiet, most of the staff having left hours ago. Melissa was reviewing contracts for a merger while Marcus worked through financial projections. Both of them comfortable in the silence, punctuated only by clicking keyboards and the occasional comment about their work. "I have a confession," Marcus said suddenly, setting down his pen. Melissa looked up from her laptop. He was standing by the windows, his tie loosened and his sleeves rolled up. The version of him she'd come to know in these after-hour sessions. The city sparkled below them, a million lights against the December darkness. "What kind of confession?" she asked, trying to keep her tone light, even as her heart rate picked up. "I've been thinking about asking you something for weeks now, but every time I try, I talk myself out of it." He turned to face her, and there was something vulnerable in his expression that made her breath catch. "There's a charity gala this Saturday, the Winter Foundation event. Black tie, insufferably boring speeches, overpriced champagne. I'm expected to attend and make an appearance. I know it's on your calendar. I coordinated with your driver about the timing, right?" "Of course you did." He smiled slightly. "Here's the thing. I hate going to these events alone. I usually bring a date, someone from my social circle who understands it's just for appearances, but this year I'd like to bring someone who actually matters to me. Someone whose company I genuinely enjoy." He paused, his dark eyes holding hers. "Would you come with me, Melissa? Not as my assistant, but as my date." The world seemed to tilt sideways. Melissa set her laptop aside carefully, buying herself time to process what she'd just heard. "Marcus, that's not a good idea." "Why not?" "Because you're my boss. Because there are power dynamics at play here that make this complicated." Because she stopped, unable to articulate the real reason. Because she'd spent 3 months trying desperately not to fall for him, and she was losing that battle badly. Marcus crossed the room, sitting in the chair across from her desk, the same position they'd been in that Monday morning when he'd changed her life. "What if I told you that I've been thinking about you in ways that have nothing to do with work? That when I restructured our benefits program, yes, I wanted to help you, but I also wanted to see you smile again. That these late nights we spend together have become the best part of my day." "Marcus, I know it's complicated. I know there are professional considerations, but Melissa, I'm 42 years old, and I've built everything I have by taking calculated risks. This doesn't feel like a risk. This feels like the most natural thing in the world." Melissa's hand was shaking. "What if it doesn't work out? What if we try this and it ruins everything we have? What if it does work out?" He countered softly. "What if we're both missing something extraordinary because we're too afraid to try?" Before she could respond, her phone buzzed insistently on the desk. She glanced at the screen and felt her blood run cold. Evergreen Memory Care. They never called this late unless something was wrong. "I have to take this," she said, already answering. "Hello." Marcus watched her face drain of color as she listened to the voice on the other end. When she hung up, her hands were trembling so badly she nearly dropped the phone. "My mom fell. They think she broke her hip. They're taking her to Presbyterian Hospital right now." Her voice sounded distant, disconnected. "I need to go. I need to." She stood too quickly and the room spun. Marcus was there instantly, his hands steadying her shoulders. "I'm driving you," he said firmly. "You don't have to, Melissa." His voice was gentle, but left no room for argument. "I'm driving you. Let's go." The drive to the hospital passed in a blur. Marcus navigated the late evening traffic with calm efficiency while Melissa sat in the passenger seat, her mind spiraling through worst-case scenarios. Hip fractures and Alzheimer's patients were serious. The confusion from anesthesia could accelerate cognitive decline. The recovery period could be devastating. She was doing so well, Melissa whispered. Last week, she remembered our old address. She told me about the garden she used to keep. She was improving. And she'll improve again, Marcus said, reaching over to take her hand. Whatever happens, whatever she needs, we'll handle it. Though we didn't escape Melissa's notice, and something in her chest cracked open. At the hospital, they were directed to the emergency department. A doctor met them in the waiting area. A woman in her 50s with kind eyes and tired smile. Miss Brennan, your mother is stable. It's a fractured hip and will need to do surgery tomorrow morning. Given her condition, there are some risks, but our orthopedic surgeon is excellent with patients who have cognitive impairments. Can I see her? Of course. She's sedated right now, but you can sit with her. Rose Brennan looked small and fragile in the hospital bed. Her blonde gray hair spread across the pillow. Melissa sank into the chair beside her, taking her mother's hand carefully, mindful of the foreline. I'm here, Mom, she whispered. I'm right here. Marcus stood in the doorway, giving them space. But Melissa turned to him. You don't have to stay. I know you have early meetings tomorrow. The meetings can wait. He pulled up another chair and sat beside her. I'm not leaving you alone. They sat in silence for a while. The beeping of monitors, the only sound. Then Rose's eyes fluttered open, cloudy with medication, but aware. Her gaze drifted from Melissa to Marcus and back again. Melissa. Her voice was raspy. Yes, Mom. I'm here. Rose's eyes went to Marcus again, and something shifted in her expression, a moment of clarity breaking through the fog. Is this him? The one you're always talking about? Melissa felt her face flame. Mom, this is Marcus. He loves you, Rose said simply, her words slightly slurred, but certain. I can see it. The way he looks at you. She squeezed Melissa's hand weakly. Don't be afraid, sweetheart. Your father looked at me the same way once upon a time. That was real. This is real, too. Then her eyes drifted closed again, and she was asleep. Melissa couldn't move, couldn't breathe. She was acutely aware of Marcus beside her, of the weight of her mother's words hanging in the air between them. Melissa, Marcus said softly. She turned to look at him, and what she saw in his eyes made her heart stop. Her mother was right. It was all there in his expression. The tenderness, the concern, the unmistakable truth of something deeper than friendship or professional respect. She's right, isn't she? Melissa whispered. Marcus reached out, gently tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. His hand lingered against her cheek. I didn't plan this. I didn't expect it. But yes, she's right. I've been falling for you since that Saturday when you broke down every wall between us. Maybe even before that, and I was just too blind to see it. Tears spilled down Melissa's cheeks. This is crazy. This is the worst possible timing. My mother is lying in a hospital bed, and I'm sitting here realizing that I'm in love with my boss. I know the timing is terrible, Marcus said, his thumb brushing away her tears. But when your mother wakes up after surgery tomorrow, and when she has good days and bad days, and when you're scared and exhausted and wondering how you're going to get through it, I want to be there. Not as your boss, not as someone who feels obligated, but as someone who loves you and wants to help carry whatever burdens come. Melissa let out a shaky breath. What about the gala? What about it? Ask me again. A smile broke across Marcus's face, transforming it with joy. Melissa Brennan, would you do me the honor of being my date to the Winter Foundation Gala this Saturday? Yes, she said, laughing through her tears. Yes, I'll go with you. He leaned forward, and for a moment Melissa thought he might kiss her, but instead he pressed his forehead against hers, a gesture so intimate it made her heart ache. We're going to figure this out, he promised. All of it together. As they sat there in the quiet hospital room, Rose sleeping peacefully between them, Melissa felt something shift inside her. For 3 months, she'd been so focused on the miracle of her changed circumstances that she'd been afraid to acknowledge the deeper transformation happening in her heart. But there was no denying it now. Everything had changed the moment Marcus Holloway walked into his apartment and found her on her knees. And somehow, impossibly, it was all leading exactly where it was meant to go. The Winter Foundation Gala was held at the Plaza Hotel. Its grand ballroom transformed into a winter wonderland of ice sculptures, crystal chandeliers, and tables draped in silver and white. Melissa stood at the entrance beside Marcus, acutely aware of the emerald silk gown he'd insisted on buying her. "Consider it a bonus," he'd said with that smile that made her knees weak and the way every eye in the room seemed to turn toward them. Her mother's surgery had gone well. Rose was recovering in a private room at Presbyterian with round-the-clock nursing care that Marcus had arranged without being asked. The hip would heal, the doctor said, though the recovery would be slow. Melissa had spent every spare moment at the hospital, and Marcus had been there, too, bringing coffee and sandwiches, reading to Rose when she was awake, and simply holding Melissa's hand when the fear became too much. "Ready?" Marcus murmured, his hand warm against the small of her back. "As I'll ever be," Melissa replied, though her stomach was full of butterflies. They'd agreed to keep things professional at the office, at least for now. But tonight was different. Tonight they were here as a couple, and the business world would talk. She could already see the speculation in people's eyes, hear the whispers that followed them as they moved through the crowd. Marcus introduced her to CEOs and philanthropists, venture capitalists and socialites. To her surprise, he didn't introduce her as his assistant. "This is Melissa Brennan," he'd say simply, his pride evident, and let them draw their own conclusions. During dinner, seated at a table with Manhattan's elite, Melissa found herself relaxing. These were just people, she realized. Wealthy, powerful people, yes, but people nonetheless. And Marcus's hand found hers under the table, his thumb tracing circles on her palm that made her forget about everyone else in the room. The speeches were, as Marcus had predicted, insufferably boring. But between the droning presentations about charitable contributions and foundation goals, he leaned close and whispered commentary that made her struggle not to laugh out loud. $5, says he mentions synergy within the next 30 seconds. Marcus murmured during one particularly tedious speech about corporate partnerships. "That's a sucker's bet." Melissa whispered back, "Make it 10 seconds. Sure enough, 7 seconds later, the speaker dropped the word and they both had to hide their smiles behind champagne glasses. It was during the dancing portion of the evening that everything shifted again. The orchestra struck up a waltz and Marcus stood offering his hand. "Dance with me." On the dance floor with his arms around her and the music swelling, Melissa felt like she was living in a dream. 3 months ago, she'd been on her knees scrubbing baseboards, drowning in debt and desperation. Now she was wearing a designer gown, dancing with a man who looked at her like she was the only person in the world. "You're thinking too hard," Marcus said. Softly, "I can see it in your face. I'm just wondering when I'm going to wake up. This is real, Melissa." He pulled her closer. "All of it. I know it happened fast, and I know the circumstances were unusual, but this is real." Before she could respond, a voice cut through the music. "Marcus Holloway, I haven't seen you in months." They turned to find a woman approaching, blonde, stunning, wearing a dress that probably cost more than Melissa's monthly salary used to be. Recognition flickered in Melissa's memory. Victoria Ashford, Hotel Eyes, and according to office gossip, one of Marcus' previous gala dates. "Victoria," Marcus said politely, though his arms didn't leave Melissa's waist. "Good to see you." Victoria's eyes swept over Melissa with barely concealed disdain. "And who is this?" "This is Melissa Brennan, my girlfriend." The word sent warmth flooding through Melissa's chest. It was the first time he'd said it out loud, claimed her publicly. Something flickered in Victoria's expression. Surprise, then calculation. "How lovely. Though I have to say, Marcus, I'm surprised. Last year, you told me you'd never date an employee. Something about professional boundaries and all that." The dig was obvious, meant to embarrass them both. Melissa felt her face flush, but Marcus' response was smooth and unbothered. "Last year, I hadn't met someone worth reconsidering those boundaries for," he said easily. "Funny how the right person can change everything you thought you knew about yourself." Victoria's smile tightened. "Well, I hope it works out. Office romances can be so complicated." After she glided away, Melissa let out a shaky breath. That was awful. That was Victoria being Victoria. Marcus resumed their dance, his expression unconcerned. "She's been trying to get me to propose for 3 years. This is the first time I've brought someone to one of these events who actually matters to me, and she knows it. Does it bother you what people will say about us? Marcus stopped dancing, pulling her to the edge of the floor where they could talk more privately. Melissa, look at me. When she met his eyes, his expression was intense, serious. I don't care what anyone says. I don't care if people think it's inappropriate or unprofessional. I care about you. And if you're worried about your job, about what this means for your career, then tomorrow I'll have HR draft a separation agreement. You can work for someone else in the company, or I'll help you find a position somewhere else with a salary that matches what you're worth. But I'm not giving you up because of gossip or propriety. Tears pricked at Melissa's eyes. I don't want to work for anyone else. Then we'll figure out together. That's what we do now. Remember? The rest of the evening passed in a blur of dancing and conversation, champagne and laughter. By the time Marcus's driver pulled up to her apartment building, Melissa's feet ached from her heels and her face hurt from smiling. Marcus walked her to her door, and in the dim hallway he pulled her close. Thank you for tonight. For being brave enough to take this risk with me. Thank you for seeing me, Melissa whispered. For really seeing me, even when I was trying to be invisible. You were never invisible to me. His hand cuffed her face gently. Maybe I didn't understand what I was seeing at first, but you were never invisible. When he kissed her, it was soft and sweet and full of promise. Every fear, every doubt, every worry about the future melted away, leaving only this perfect moment, this impossible man, this life she'd never dared to dream of. 6 months later, Melissa sat in her mother's room at Evergreen, helping Rose work on a puzzle. It was a good day, one of the increasingly rare ones where her mother's mind was clear and present. Tell me about Marcus again, Rose said, fitting a piece into place with satisfaction. Melissa smiled, glancing at the engagement ring on her finger. A simple emerald surrounded by diamonds that Marcus had presented to her on a beach in the Hamptons last month. What do you want to know? How did he propose? We were watching the sunset. He told me that the first time he realized he loved me was the day he found me cleaning his apartment. He said seeing me vulnerable and human and real instead of the perfect professional I always try to be at work made him understand that I was the person he wanted to spend his life with. Rose's eyes were misty. Your father proposed to me in our kitchen. No fancy dinner. No big gesture. Just him and me and the truth between us. She squeezed Melissa's hand. That's what matters, honey. Not the circumstances. Not what anyone else thinks. Just the truth of it. I know. Mom, promise me something, Rose said. And her voice had that quality it got when she was worried she might forget. Promise me you'll be happy. Promise me you won't spend so much time taking care of everyone else that you forget to live your own life. I promise, Melissa said, her throat tight. That evening, Marcus picked her up from Evergreen, just as he did most evenings. They drove to their favorite Italian restaurant, a small place in Brooklyn that didn't care who Marcus Holloway was, where the owner knew their usual order and saved them their favorite table. Over pasta and wine, Marcus told her about his day, about the new initiative he was planning for employee family benefits, about the foundation he wanted to start in Rose's name to help other families dealing with Alzheimer's. You don't have to do that, Melissa protested, though her heart swelled with love. I want to. Your mother's clarity today, her ability to share that moment with you. That's what the right care can provide. Every family deserves that chance. He reached across the table, taking her hand. Besides, I've been thinking about legacy lately, about what matters. And I've realized that the best thing I've ever built isn't Holloway Enterprises. It's this us, the life we're creating together. Melissa thought about the journey that had brought them here. From that rainy Saturday when desperation had driven her to clean his apartment, through the hospital vigils and late-night conversations, through the gala and the gossip and the gorgeous, terrifying leap of faith they'd taken together. I used to think I had to handle everything alone, she said softly. I thought asking for help made me weak. And now I know that the strongest thing I ever did was let you help me. Let you see me. Let you love me. Marcus raised his wine glass to being seen, to being loved, to finding each other exactly when we needed to. Melissa clinked her glass against his. To finding home in the most unexpected places as they sat there in their favorite restaurant, planning their future and savoring their present. Melissa understood that sometimes the most beautiful love stories begin in the most unlikely ways. Sometimes you have to hit rock bottom before someone can lift you up. And sometimes the person who changes your entire life is the one who is standing beside you all along, just waiting for you both to finally see each other clearly. Her mother had been right that night in the hospital. This was real, and it was exactly where she was meant to be. Subscribe.